Your brain hides more than it reveals. Let's uncover 100 of its secrets. You're not who you think you are. That voice in your head, the one narrating your day and naming your thoughts, it feels so familiar, so stable. But that sense of you is a clever fiction, constructed and reconstructed moment by moment. Your brain, vast and mysterious, has no single location for the self. It's not stored in one spot, like a file in a cabinet. Instead, your identity is an ongoing performance, stitched together by memories, predictions, and fragments of perception that feel coherent only because your mind insists on coherence. Every time you recall who you are, your brain pulls data from different regions, your autobiographical memory, your emotional history, your physical sensations, and the social roles you've internalized. These streams converge into a single illusion, that there is one continuous you behind the eyes. But this self is more like a mask, shaped by who you're with, where you are, and what you believe others expect. In solitude, one version arises. Among friends, another. The brain flexes to match its social environment seamlessly. You might feel like a single person from day to day, but science gently suggests otherwise. Studies of brain injury, dissociation, and even daily shifts in mood show that personality isn't a fixed entity. It's dynamic, fluctuating, and contextual. The person you are while arguing is not the same as the one who meditates. Even the language you use changes how you think, altering the very texture of your inner world. One of the most fascinating mechanisms behind this illusion of self is how your brain filters what it shares with you. Many processes, emotional responses, behavioral impulses, bodily reactions happen without your awareness. The mind presents you with a finished product, a polished version of your choices and identity, but hides the drafts. Like a good editor, it shows you the final article, never the scribbles in the margins. Even decisions that feel deeply personal may not originate from where you think. Some experiments suggest that your brain begins preparing to act milliseconds before you consciously decide. The decision you experience is often a label applied after the fact, a way for your conscious mind to stay in sync with what's already happening. It feels like you're in control, but often you're observing. This is not to diminish your existence, it's to illuminate it, to know that you are not a statue carved in stone, but a river constantly reshaped by experience, emotion, and expectation, is to find freedom. It means you can evolve, that no identity is permanent, that every moment your brain is offering you a chance to change the narrative, to become a new version of you. And this fiction of self, for all its illusions, is not a failure, it's a feature. It allows the brain to operate smoothly, to navigate social life, to reflect and plan. It gives rise to storytelling, culture, and memory. But while it guides you, it's worth remembering the narrator inside isn't always reliable. And if your self is fluid, if identity bends and shifts like wind across water, what happens to memory, that fragile thread tying your past to your present? Memory feels like a vault, a place where experiences are stored untouched, waiting to be retrieved as needed. You picture a childhood scene, recall a conversation, relive a triumph, but this sense of permanence is misleading. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction, and each time you remember something, your brain is editing it, subtly, sometimes drastically, as if every trip into the past is also a rewriting of it. This means that memory is alive, it breathes and changes, and often what you remember is not what happened, but what you've remembered before. Each recall subtly distorts until even cherished memories become polished myths. When you recall an event, your brain doesn't open a drawer and take out a perfect copy. It activates a pattern, neural circuits that reassemble the experience. But the act of remembering destabilizes it. The brain pulls the memory into a fragile, changeable state. And during this window, new emotions, current beliefs, even background sounds can become fused into that memory. When the brain restores it, the memory now contains traces of the present. False memories, too, are not errors of the foolish. They are a natural side effect of a flexible memory system. People can come to believe with certainty that they experienced something they never did. These illusions arise not from deception, but from the same mechanisms that allow imagination, empathy, and creativity. The brain fills gaps. It predicts. It connects emotional resonance to fragments of events. And in doing so, it creates a seamless narrative, even if it never occurred. Emotion plays a pivotal role. Memories tied to strong emotions are more likely to be retained, but not with more accuracy. In fact, emotionally intense memories are often the least reliable, because the brain, in its urgency, stores the feeling more than the details. It remembers how it felt to be betrayed, more than what was actually said. It remembers the fear in a moment of danger, not the color of the walls. Sleep is perhaps the strangest co-author of your memories. During deep sleep, your brain replays fragments of the day, deciding what to keep, what to let go. This isn't passive storage, it's active editing. Some details are emphasized, others muted. Associations are strengthened or erased, and in dreams these fragments are recombined in new, sometimes surreal ways. What emerges is not a duplicate of the day, but a refined story, filtered through your emotional and psychological needs. But if your memories shift like sand, if yesterday changes depending on today, then how can you trust what you know during sleep, that secret world where the mind has no anchors at all? You might even implant memories in others without meaning to, telling a story again and again, with subtle exaggerations or shifts, can lead listeners, and even yourself, to believe in events that never happened. Families often have shared memories that no one can verify, yet everyone agrees on. These communal recollections bind us together, even if their origins are foggy. So what does this mean? That the past isn't fixed, that the story you carry about your life is in some ways a fiction, guided by truth, but sculpted by belief, bias, and time. And far from being frightening, this offers a kind of grace. It means healing is possible, that even the past, through memory, is open to transformation. Sleep is more than rest. It is the hidden architecture of your mind, the quiet laboratory where your brain performs its most delicate operations. As your body surrenders to stillness, your brain begins its work, not by switching off, but by reorganizing, cleaning, and sculpting the very foundation of your being. In this darkness, neurons don't go silent. They hum, flicker, pulse in rhythmic patterns. They sort, stitch, and sometimes sever. Each night you drift through stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, each with a distinct neurological signature. In deep sleep, your brain washes itself. Literally, cerebrospinal fluid pulses through your brain in waves, flushing out metabolic waste, including proteins linked to neurodegeneration. Like a tide sweeping ashore, this nightly rinse clears the clutter of consciousness. It's during these deep phases that your brain also consolidates memory. The day's experiences are not stored as is. They're disassembled, sorted, and relinked in meaningful ways. Important details are strengthened, and irrelevant ones fade. Sometimes the brain even fabricates missing information to make stories feel more coherent. You wake up with a slightly different version of your day, more structured, more emotionally digestible. But memory isn't the only thing transformed in sleep. Emotions undergo processing too. The brain revisits difficult feelings from the day, softening sharp edges. REM sleep, in particular, allows you to re-experience emotional events in a safe internal space without the accompanying adrenaline. It's like watching your life in low light, from a distance. And when you awake, the memory may still be there, but its emotional charge often isn't. This is not erasure, it's recalibration. Dreams, those surreal mosaics, are not random. They reflect your brain's attempt to link new information with old frameworks. They test possibilities, simulate threats, replay regrets, Some dreams feel nonsensical, but if you observe them gently, patterns emerge. Your fears and desires, veiled in metaphor, that long hallway with no exit, the forgotten face, the sudden fall, they're all fragments your mind is trying to reconcile. Lucid dreaming exists at the edge of this mystery. In it, the dreaming brain becomes partially conscious. You realize you are dreaming, and can even shape the narrative. It's a rare state, blending the freedom of dreams with the agency of waking life. Neurologically, lucid dreams show unique patterns, a blend of REM sleep with increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logic and self-awareness. But sleep deprivation reveals the fragility of this system. A brain starved of rest begins to malfunction, and not subtly. Focus falters. Emotions become erratic. Hallucinations can arise. After prolonged sleep loss, the brain mimics the damage seen in traumatic brain injury. Connections fray. Processing slows. And worst of all, the very circuits responsible for self-monitoring begin to degrade, leaving you unaware of your own decline. In this vulnerable state, even small irritations become overwhelming. Your amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm, becomes hyperactive, rational thought dims, and the world feels hostile, not because it is, but because your brain lacks the clarity to interpret it differently. Rest is not optional, it is a biological requirement for emotional and cognitive sanity. Sleep also modulates your immune system, hormone production, and metabolic health. But more subtly, it is essential for identity. Without dreams, memory consolidation, emotional filtering, you lose the thread of who you are. You stop learning not just facts, but about yourself. Your sense of continuity begins to fray. Each night, sleep allows your brain to rehearse the performance of being you. It rebinds scattered thoughts into coherence. It resolves contradictions. It soothes emotional wounds without forgetting them. And in doing so, it keeps your inner world stable, flexible, alive. So when you close your eyes and drift, know this: you are not turning off. You are beginning one of the brain's most complex and vital processes. In that stillness, your mind is at work, restoring not just energy, but meaning. And while your sleeping brain rearranges memories and emotions, another system pulses quietly beneath it all, one that links thought to flesh, feeling to biology, because emotions too are not just shadows of the mind, they are embodied states written into your very skin. We often think of emotions as fleeting whispers of the mind, intangible, poetic, untouchable, but your brain tells a different story. Emotions are not just felt, they are embodied. When you are sad, you don't simply feel sad, you become sadness. Your muscles slacken, your posture folds inward, your breathing slows, your gut tightens. These aren't reactions to an emotion, they are the emotion. The body and brain move as one, choreographing a response that is both ancient and immediate. Every emotion begins as a signal in the brain, a whisper of neural chemistry, but it spreads quickly. The limbic system, especially the amygdala, reads your internal environment like a scanner. When it senses change, it sends signals to every major system: cardiovascular, respiratory, endocrine, gastrointestinal. The result is a full body response. Anger floods the bloodstream with adrenaline, preparing for battle. Fear pulls blood from your skin and pushes it toward your core, shielding vital organs. Joy relaxes tension in your muscles and releases oxytocin, opening the body to connection. But it's not a one-way street. Your body can also create emotion. Change your posture, and you alter the emotional signals reaching your brain. Slow your breath, and your amygdala begins to calm. Smile, even artificially, and serotonin may rise. This is not trickery, it's feedback. Your brain listens to your body to know how to feel. The two are in constant conversation. Even more mysteriously, emotions are contagious. You don't need to see a tear fall to feel sorrow. A trembling voice, a shifting posture, a subtle facial expression. All can transmit emotion directly from one nervous system to another. This is due to mirror neurons, which activate not just when you feel an emotion, but when you observe it in someone else. Your brain simulates their state within your own. You become their sadness, their joy, their tension, as if your mind is a tuning fork resonating with others. Emotional pain is not metaphorical either. The brain processes rejection and heartbreak using the same circuits activated during physical injury. The anterior cingulate cortex, which lights up when you burn your hand, also activates when you feel excluded or unloved. It doesn't just feel like you're hurt, you are. Hormones also play a profound role. Cortisol, released during stress, alters memory formation and perception. It narrows attention, focuses the mind on threat. Oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, promotes bonding and trust, but also increases in-group bias, making you more defensive toward outsiders. Emotions shape the chemical landscape of your brain, and that landscape in turn reshapes the emotions you are capable of feeling. Breath, so simple, so automatic, is one of the most direct tools to regulate emotion. Deep, slow breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling safety. Rapid, shallow breaths send danger signals. This is why breathing exercises work, not because they calm your thoughts, but because they calm your body, and your body informs your thoughts. The heart, too, plays a role. Heart rate variability, the subtle changes in the interval between heartbeats, is a marker of emotional regulation. High variability means your body is responsive, flexible, able to adapt. Low variability is linked with rigidity, anxiety, and poor emotional recovery. And the vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem through your heart and into your gut, acts as the main channel of this body-brain communication. Emotions also shape how we remember. An event marked by fear or awe is more likely to be stored vividly, even if inaccurately. This emotional tagging helps the brain prioritize survival-relevant information, but it can also distort perception. When you are angry, you remember slights more clearly. When you are sad, you recall past losses more easily. Emotion is a lens that filters memory, making the past shimmer differently depending on your current state. And yet, emotions are also guides. They tell you what matters. A rush of shame may reveal your values. A flicker of joy may point to your purpose. When felt with awareness, emotions are not obstacles, but maps, tools of ancient intelligence embedded in every cell. But what happens when these tools are hijacked? When your perceptions are altered not by emotion, but by hallucination? When the world you experience is not the world as it is, but as your brain predicts it to be? Because what you see, feel, and hear may be nothing more than a controlled dream. Right now, as you lie still and listen, your mind is conjuring a reality that feels solid. You believe your eyes report the truth, that what you see is what exists. But in truth, you are hallucinating every moment, constantly. What you experience is not a direct reflection of the outside world. It's your brain's best guess, shaped by memory, emotion, and survival. Reality, as you know it, is a controlled hallucination. When light enters your eyes, it strikes the retina and is translated into electrical signals. But those signals are raw data, meaningless on their own. It's the brain that interprets them, assembling a visual world from patterns, probabilities, and previous experiences. The brain doesn't see, it interprets. You think you're seeing a tree, or a face, or a room, but your brain is stitching together fragments, filling gaps, inventing colors, and smoothing transitions. It creates a seamless movie where there was once only noise. There is a blind spot in each eye where the optic nerve leaves the retina and no light is detected. You don't see a hole in your vision because your brain fills it in with surrounding information. It does this so convincingly that you are unaware anything is missing. The illusion is complete. The colors you perceive don't exist outside your brain. Light has wavelengths, not hues. There is no red in the world. only waves at a certain frequency. Your brain interprets those frequencies and assigns color, but that interpretation is influenced by context. A gray square on a blue background can look blue. The same square on a yellow background can look brown. This is not a trick. It's perception doing its job. It's making the world consistent, not accurate. In fact, you never experience the present moment. Your brain is always slightly behind, buffering sensory input by about 80 milliseconds to synchronize data from multiple sensors. It predicts what should be happening and serves you a constructed now. This delay is unnoticeable, but it means you're always experiencing a simulation of the past, not the present. Attention plays a powerful role in this constructed reality. Without attention, objects can literally disappear. In experiments, people fail to notice massive changes in a scene, buildings vanishing, colors shifting, objects appearing, because they weren't attending to them. Your brain renders only what it deems important. Everything else fades into a background blur, half-formed, unfinished. In the absence of sensory input, the brain doesn't go dark, it keeps hallucinating. When blindfolded for extended periods, people begin to see lights, colors, even faces. The brain hates a vacuum. It generates experience from within. This is why dreams feel so vivid. Your brain continues its hallucination, just without constraints. Even your sense of motion is predictive. When you turn your head, your brain predicts the new visual scene before your eyes actually adjust. This is why the world doesn't smear when you move. It's not just your eyes compensating. It's your brain forecasting, correcting in advance. The notion that you see the world is a comforting fiction. You are not a camera capturing images. You are a storyteller, a composer, a simulator. Your brain combines input with expectation, creating a model of the world that is useful, not truthful. Consider auditory hallucinations. In people with schizophrenia, voices can emerge without any external sound. These experiences feel real because the same brain regions activate as when hearing actual voices. The brain is capable of producing perception without input, and in milder forms, we all experience this, hearing your name in a crowd, thinking you heard a phone buzz when it didn't, mishearing a word and being convinced it was something else. Even pain is subject to this predictive hallucination. People with phantom limb syndrome feel sensations in limbs that no longer exist. Their brains still maintain a map of the body, and that map doesn't update quickly. The pain feels real because it is, neurologically speaking, even if the source is absent. Virtual reality technology exploits this system beautifully. By providing just enough sensory cues, it tricks the brain into believing in an entirely artificial world. You duck from fake projectiles, reach for non-existent objects. The body reacts, the heart races, even though logically you know it's not real. The simulation overrides reason. But these controlled hallucinations are not flaws. They are the essence of consciousness. The brain, limited by time, energy, and evolution, must make quick decisions. It uses prior experience to infer the most likely interpretation of incoming data. This predictive coding allows for speed, fluidity, and survival. You see what you expect, because seeing everything as it truly is would be overwhelming. And sometimes this system gives rise to wonder, illusions that defy logic, moments of déjà vu, glimpses of beauty in randomness. These are signs of a brain reaching beyond the raw, searching for meaning. So next time you open your eyes and see the world, remember, you are not witnessing truth. You are participating in a hallucination, exquisitely crafted, endlessly adaptive. And while your mind simulates this world, something even deeper is at play. Your sense of choice, your belief in control. But what if that too is an illusion? You feel in control. You decide what to eat, where to walk, when to speak. It feels like every thought you think, every action you take, is authored by you. But beneath that comforting sensation of agency lies a deeper truth. Your brain often acts before you do. The experience of free will, while powerful, is mostly a carefully timed illusion, a post-it note stuck over something older, faster, and hidden. Scientists have found that your brain begins preparing for actions milliseconds, even seconds, before you become consciously aware of deciding. In classic experiments, participants were asked to press a button at a time of their choosing and report the exact moment they decided to act. Brain scans showed activity related to the decision occurring before the participants reported their choice. The brain had already begun. It's not that your choices are meaningless, but rather that the conscious you comes in late to the process, like a spokesperson who announces policies they didn't write. This delay is so subtle, so invisible, that you live in the illusion of authorship, unaware of the machinery behind the curtain. After actions occur, your brain works hard to generate a narrative that explains them. It constructs reasons that feel true. I chose the blue one because I like blue, you might say. But in reality, the choice may have been driven by priming, mood, or subconscious pattern recognition. The explanation is sincere, but often inaccurate. The story of why you act is often a retrospective guess. Much of your behavior is guided by automatic circuits, habits, impulses, learned responses. When you drive a familiar route, your brain slips into efficiency mode, conserving energy. You may arrive without remembering the drive at all. It wasn't that you weren't present, it's that the decision-making had been delegated to subroutines. Free will wasn't needed. Your preferences, too, are shaped more by context than choice. Studies show that people rate wines as better when they believe they're expensive. They enjoy food more when it's plated artfully. They even find strangers more attractive depending on scent, voice tone, or body language, none of which they chose to notice. Your brain constructs desire from subtle signals long before you're aware of wanting. Belief in free will has evolutionary advantages. It motivates action, fosters accountability, and enables complex social cooperation. Societies are built on the premise that individuals can choose rightly or wrongly, and from a functional perspective, this belief helps, but biologically, it's not so clear. Your brain leans toward confirming your actions after the fact. Once you've chosen something, you're more likely to view it as positive. This is known as choice-supportive bias. It reinforces your sense of self as a good decision-maker, but it also means your sense of certainty isn't always tied to truth. In high-stress situations, your perception of agency can collapse. People describe feeling like passengers in their own bodies, watching events unfold with a strange detachment. Trauma survivors often report dissociation, a protective mechanism where consciousness splits from action. The brain shields you from pain by muting your sense of authorship. Even moral decisions are shaped by unconscious factors. Whether someone is judged harshly or kindly can depend on whether the judge is hungry, tired, or reminded of certain concepts beforehand. We like to think our moral compass is fixed, but it sways with conditions, subtly and constantly. But this doesn't mean you are powerless. It means that true choice requires awareness. The more conscious you become of your biases, patterns, and emotional triggers, the more you can intervene. Free will may not be a default. It may be a skill, a capacity you cultivate, not an automatic gift. Mindfulness practices aim at this exact skill, noticing the impulse before it becomes action, observing the thought without identifying with it. That tiny pause, that sliver of awareness, is where agency can live, not in the automatic reaction, but in the response you choose after noticing the reaction. There is also a kind of freedom in knowing that not everything arises from deliberate intent. You can forgive yourself for thoughts you didn't choose, feelings that emerged uninvited, reactions conditioned over years. You can observe them, learn from them, and slowly reshape the terrain they come from. So while your brain often acts before you're aware, it also gives you the tools to reflect, to rewire, to change. And that perhaps is the deeper form of free will. not the illusion of perfect control, but the real power to evolve. Still, even that evolution rests on thought, and thought itself is not static. Each idea you entertain leaves a trace, a footprint in the sand of your mind, because thoughts are not abstract, they're biological. They leave physical marks. And that means the way you think can literally change the shape of your brain. Every thought you have is like a brushstroke on the canvas of your brain. You may not see it, but it leaves a mark, subtle, physical, and lasting. Each idea, each memory, each moment of focus or reflection doesn't just pass through you, it changes you. Because thought is not invisible. It's not vapor. It's chemistry and electricity, sculpting the very structure of your mind. This idea is known as neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself based on experience. It is one of the most astonishing features of your biology. Unlike machines or rigid circuits, your neural network reshapes itself continuously. It grows, prunes, reinforces, adapts, and thought is one of its most powerful sculptors. When you repeat a thought, especially with emotional intensity, you activate a specific set of neurons. Each activation strengthens the connections between them. It's like a footpath through a forest. The more often you walk it, the clearer it becomes. The brain begins to prefer that path. It becomes faster, more automatic. Eventually it becomes a default. This is how beliefs form, not simply as logical conclusions, but as well-trodden patterns in the brain. Think a thought enough times, and it becomes not just something you think, it becomes part of how you think. That's why positive affirmations, negative self-talk, anxious rumination, they're not just ideas, they're construction materials for the mind. Habits of thought are just that, habits. And like any habit, they can be unlearned. But the process is not instantaneous. To create a new path, the brain must devote energy to forging connections. This takes repetition, emotion, attention. The old path doesn't vanish immediately. It fades as it's used less. Like an overgrown trail, it can be reclaimed, but only with time. Visualization, a technique athletes, artists, and meditators have used for decades, proves how thought can mimic action. When you imagine performing a task vividly, your brain activates many of the same areas as if you were doing it physically. Neural circuits fire, muscles receive low-level signals, and the motor cortex lights up. The brain doesn't always distinguish between imagined and real. That's how potent thought is. It prepares the body for realities that haven't occurred yet. This is also why chronic negative thinking is dangerous. It wires the brain for threat. Over time, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes more sensitive. It activates more quickly, more often. The hippocampus, which helps regulate emotional memory, can shrink. Cortisol floods the system more easily. Eventually, the brain begins to seek danger, even in safe situations. It's not that the world is more threatening, it's that the brain has been conditioned to expect threat. Meditation, in contrast, has been shown to physically alter the brain in the opposite direction. Long-term practitioners exhibit increased thickness in regions related to attention, emotional regulation, and empathy. The default mode network, the part of the brain that generates wandering, self-referential thought, becomes less active. The result is a quieter mind, not just in feeling, but in structure. But it's not just meditation. Any focused mental effort, repeated over time, reshapes the brain. Learning a language thickens certain white matter tracts. Practicing an instrument refines motor and auditory regions. Engaging in therapy can reduce activity in regions associated with fear, while enhancing those linked to reflection. Even your environment changes your neural architecture. A brain exposed to novelty, new places, people, ideas, grows more robust networks. It becomes more flexible, more adaptable. In contrast, monotony leads to rigidity. Without fresh stimulation, the brain conserves energy by reinforcing existing patterns, which can entrench unhelpful behaviors or mindsets. Your thoughts also influence your body's chemistry. Gratitude, for instance, is not just a virtue, it's a biochemical shift. When you dwell on appreciation, dopamine and serotonin levels rise, stress hormones drop, your immune system gets a boost. These aren't metaphors. They're measurable changes, all triggered by thought. On a cellular level, thoughts even influence gene expression. This field, epigenetics, shows that while your DNA provides the blueprint, your environment and mental state influence which genes are activated. Stress, for instance, can switch on genes related to inflammation. Calm can deactivate them. Your thoughts become signals that determine how your biology unfolds. So when people say, change your thoughts, change your life, it's not just motivational rhetoric, it's neuroscience. To think differently is to become different, physically, emotionally, cognitively. But this knowledge comes with responsibility, because if your thoughts shape your brain, then what you feed your mind matters. The stories you tell yourself, the information you consume, the focus you maintain, all of it is neural nutrition. Junk thoughts, like junk food, build weak structures, but nourishing thoughts, curiosity, compassion, resilience, build a mind that can adapt, grow, and thrive. Yet there's something even more subtle. Even silence, the absence of deliberate thought, shapes your mind. In moments of stillness, your brain's default mode network activates. This isn't inactivity, it's introspection. It's the mind weaving together memories, resolving contradictions, preparing for future action. Even in rest, your brain is sculpting. And so every moment of awareness, every reflection, every intention, it matters. You are not at the mercy of your brain. You are its collaborator, its co-creator. And as you sculpt your thoughts sculpt you. But sometimes the most powerful transformations don't arise from thinking at all. They come from stillness, from silence, from the profound spaces between sounds, where the mind begins to listen not to the world, but to itself. Silence. It may seem like the absence of something. No voices, no noise, no distractions. But to your brain, silence is far from empty. It is, paradoxically, a moment of powerful activity, an invitation for introspection, integration, and recalibration. In fact, silence can activate parts of your brain that noise cannot. When the external world goes quiet, your internal world comes alive. In studies where participants sat in silence, researchers observed increased activity in the default mode network, the same system that lights up during self-reflection, daydreaming, and memory recall. It's as if silence gives the brain permission to wander inward, to pause the constant input stream, and finally process what has been accumulating in the background. The effect isn't merely psychological, it's physiological. Moments of silence can lower blood pressure, reduce cortisol levels, and improve heart rate variability. The nervous system exits a state of alertness and begins to restore itself. But more fascinating still is how silence affects cognition. After just a few minutes without noise, the brain begins making novel connections between ideas, pulling together fragments that had remained disjointed while attention was scattered. Creativity blooms in silence, not because the mind is empty, but because it is finally undisturbed. Neuroscientists have found that 2 minutes of silence can be more relaxing than listening to relaxing music. In fact, silence is not passive at all. It's a signal to the brain to shift gears, to enter a different rhythm. It's like a reset button for attention, focus, and emotional regulation. One of the most profound ways silence changes the brain is through what's called sensory gating. Normally, your brain filters incoming stimuli, deciding which signals to let through and which to ignore. In environments saturated with noise, this filtering system is overtaxed. But in silence, the gate can rest. The noise threshold lowers. The brain becomes more sensitive to subtle cues, both internal and external. This is why silence can feel louder than sound. In its quietude, you begin to hear the subtle things, the faint thump of your heartbeat, the whisper of your breath, the creak of your joints, the rustle of your own thoughts. These are not new. They were always there. but only now does your awareness have the space to register them. Silence magnifies awareness. It also reshapes time. In silence, the usual pace of events slows, minutes stretch, sensations deepen. The mind, unanchored from the ticking of clocks and the pinging of alerts, slips into a more fluid sense of duration. This subjective time, moulded by attention and presence, contrasts sharply with the mechanical time of devices and schedules. And in that space, something curious happens. Your internal dialogue often grows louder. The voice inside your head, so often drowned out, begins to speak more clearly. You may notice worries, desires, fragments of memory, questions without answers. At first, this can be uncomfortable, but with gentle attention, this voice becomes a guide, not always correct, but always revealing. This is why many meditative traditions emphasize silence, not as absence, but as presence, as the ground from which clarity arises. In this stillness, you encounter not emptiness, but the full orchestra of your mind. You learn which thoughts are echoes, which are calls. You begin to distinguish signal from noise. And silence doesn't just reveal thought, it also allows it to change form. Ideas you've been struggling with suddenly reframe themselves. Emotions you couldn't name become clear. Silence creates the mental space where integration can happen. Like a puzzle finding its shape, the fragments align. But the power of silence extends beyond self-awareness. It enhances memory. After periods of quiet, the brain is better able to encode and consolidate new information. It's as if silence provides a moment for the mind to catch up, to take the scattered contents of experience and gently sort them into their proper places. Even your perception of music changes with silence. A pause in a song heightens tension. It frames what comes next. The brain anticipates, imagines, fills the void. This principle applies to thought as well. When you pause before speaking, before reacting, your mind has a chance to respond with wisdom instead of reflex. In conversation, silence is not awkward. It is connective. A shared pause can be more intimate than words. It allows you to sense the mood of the room, to feel the presence of another without interpretation. In that mutual quiet, empathy can emerge. Yet modern life fears silence. It fills every gap with sound, with stimulation, with distraction. We fear being alone with our thoughts, but it is precisely in those moments of solitude and silence that the deepest parts of us are revealed, not to judge or scold, but to be heard. And when silence is practiced intentionally, through stillness, breath, or quiet contemplation, it becomes a skill, one that strengthens the brain's ability to regulate emotion, to direct focus, to tune in instead of tuning out. It becomes a sanctuary, a place you can return to, regardless of the noise around you. So the next time you find yourself in silence, resist the urge to fill it. Let it open instead. Let it stretch. Allow the brain to wander, not aimlessly, but freely. Watch what arises. Notice the patterns. Listen for the faint voices of intuition, memory, and longing. Because in that space, deeper than thought, quieter than language, you may find not emptiness, but meaning. And when the world returns with its rush and roar, you'll carry a piece of that silence with you, like an echo in the mind, a rhythm beneath the noise. And in that rhythm something else begins to emerge, a revelation more unsettling than silence itself. Your senses, those trusted windows to the world, might not be reporting what's real, but what your brain simply expects to be, what you perceive, what you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, feels direct, immediate, and real. But each of these senses is not a mirror of reality. They are guesses, calculated, elegant, often astonishingly accurate guesses, but guesses nonetheless. Your brain is not a passive receiver of the world. It is a prediction machine, constantly anticipating what's out there, then correcting those predictions based on feedback. In essence, perception is not received, it is constructed. Vision, for instance, may feel like a camera feeding real-time images into your awareness, but in truth, only a small fraction of the visual field is processed with detail. The brain fills in the rest using memory, context, and expectation. What you see is heavily shaped by what you expect to see. It's why illusions work. It's why the same image can shift before your eyes, depending on your focus or your assumptions. Consider the phenomenon of change blindness. When observers are shown two alternating images with a minor difference, say a lamp missing from a room, they often fail to notice the change even after multiple viewings. The brain, rather than examining every pixel, assumes continuity unless a prediction fails. Only then does it update the model. Until that point, the missing lamp doesn't exist, not in your conscious mind. Hearing is no different. You think you're listening to the world, but what you actually hear is influenced heavily by your brain's predictions. In noisy environments, your auditory cortex fills in missing sounds to complete sentences. This is why you can understand a conversation even if parts of it are drowned out. The brain doesn't just wait for sounds, it predicts what should be heard and fills the blanks before you realize they were ever missing. There's a striking example of this in the McGurk effect. If you hear the sound bar but see a video of someone mouthing far, your brain will often make you hear far, a hybrid of the sound and visual input. The auditory system does not work in isolation. It negotiates with sight, context, and learn expectation to create a unified experience, and often it chooses coherence over accuracy. Touch, the most physical of senses, is equally prone to manipulation. Experiments with the rubber hand illusion demonstrate how easily the brain can be tricked. A fake rubber hand is placed next to a participant's real hand, hidden from view. Both the real and rubber hand are stroked simultaneously. After a few moments, the participant begins to feel sensation in the rubber hand. Their brain has remapped their sense of ownership based on synchronized visual and tactile input. The mind adopts the illusion as real. Even more astonishing is the case of phantom limb syndrome. After an amputation, some individuals still feel sensations, itching, pain, temperature, in a limb that no longer exists. The brain retains a neural map of the body, and unless updated with new feedback, it continues to expect the limb's presence. This is not mere memory, it is a live prediction loop that the brain maintains until proven otherwise. Taste and smell, too, are guided by belief and context. In blind tastings, people often fail to distinguish between red and white wine, but when food is labeled gourmet, or when its color is subtly altered, flavor perception changes. Your brain receives signals from taste receptors, but how it interprets them depends on visual cues, prior experiences, even emotional state. This predictive framework explains why first impressions are so powerful. When you expect someone to be kind, or cold, or intelligent, your brain begins filtering their behavior through that lens. It sees what it expects, and often misses what doesn't fit. Your senses, far from objective reporters, are biased processes shaped by your internal models. Even pain, the most primal signal, is subject to prediction. Athletes in the heat of competition sometimes sustain injuries without realizing it. Only later, when the context shifts and attention returns, does the pain arise. The brain decides when and how much pain to deliver, depending on survival relevance. In chronic pain conditions, this system can malfunction, generating real pain even in the absence of damage, because the brain predicts it should be there. This predictive nature of perception isn't a flaw, it's an adaptation. It allows for faster responses, more efficient decision-making. By anticipating input, the brain reduces the processing load and improves survival. But it also means reality, as you experience it, is not direct. It's a model, a useful, dynamic, sometimes flawed approximation of what's out there. And these models can change. When you learn, when you travel, when you encounter something unfamiliar, your brain updates its predictions. This is why novelty feels so vivid. The brain is no longer leaning on expectation. It's forced to observe more carefully. You pay attention, and attention sharpens perception. But living in a world of guesses means we must question our assumptions. We must accept that what feels real may be a story our brain tells us, not a fact about the world. It urges humility, curiosity, openness. It invites us to explore, not just react, to test the edges of perception and expand what we allow ourselves to notice. And when perception is shaped by prediction, and the senses are not fixed portals but flexible interpreters, what then happens to your experience of self? If your body and your reality are both fluid, can it be that even the you perceive is just another educated guess? Every day, without realizing it, you live not as one unified being, but as many versions of yourself. There is the version of you that reacts instinctively, the one that reflects deeply, the one that plays a role in public, and the one that hides in private. These aren't masks you wear. They are actual states your brain enters, complete with unique neural signatures. And in the quiet interplay between them, you shift constantly, like a kaleidoscope turning in the dark. Your inner dialogue, those thoughts and responses that echo silently in your mind, is not a monologue, it's a conversation. Multiple voices, perspectives, and patterns of thought take turns guiding your behavior. At times, one voice is critical, another gentle. One urges caution, another craves adventure. Neuroscience shows that different neural networks are engaged, depending on your mood, your goal, and even who you believe is watching. This multiplicity of self is not a flaw. It's a form of mental flexibility that allows you to adapt to changing environments. When you're at work, your executive functions dominate. Your prefrontal cortex organizes, prioritizes, restrains. When you're with close friends, social and emotional circuits become more active, softening judgment, enhancing empathy. When you're alone, your default mode network activates, inviting memory, reflection, even fantasy. These shifts are not conscious decisions. They're automatic recalibrations based on internal and external cues. Your brain prepares you for the role you need to play by reshaping how you process the world. That's why a confident speaker on stage may feel timid in intimate conversation, or a playful friend may become deeply analytical when problem solving. It's not about faking, it's about accessing different parts of your mental ecosystem. Cognitive dissonance, too, reveals this fragmentation. When your actions contradict your beliefs, your brain doesn't simply accept the mismatch. It creates tension. One self says, "This is right." Another says, "But I did the opposite." To resolve the conflict, the brain may adjust your memory, beliefs, or perception of the action, not to deceive, but to maintain coherence within the self-model. Daydreaming, often dismissed as distraction, is actually a window into this multiplicity. When your mind wanders, it rehearses different versions of you. Scenarios play out, what you might say, who you could be, what would happen if. These simulations allow your brain to explore alternative selves without risk. It's mental time travel, not just into possible futures, but into parallel identities. In moments of stress or trauma, this division can become more pronounced. Dissociation, a psychological response, where you feel detached from yourself or reality, is a defense mechanism. The brain temporarily disconnects parts of awareness to protect itself. While this can be disorienting, it underscores the fact that your experience of self is modular. Certain modules can be turned down, others heightened, depending on need. This fragmentation is mirrored in extreme cases, like split-brain patients, individuals whose corpus callosum, the bridge between the brain's hemispheres, has been severed. In some experiments, one side of the brain sees something and reacts, while the other, unaware, creates an explanation. These patients can exhibit two separate streams of consciousness within one body. It's a dramatic illustration of how unity of self is an illusion maintained by integration, not an unchangeable core. Your memories, too, are sorted and categorized by different selves. You may remember the same event differently depending on the emotional state you were in when it occurred, and again when you recall it. This is known as state-dependent memory. When you're happy, you more easily access positive memories. When you're sad, your brain retrieves episodes colored by sorrow. Your current mood acts like a key, unlocking different chapters of your inner story. Social interactions demand rapid switching between selves. Mirror neurons activate to simulate others' thoughts, feelings, and reactions. Your brain rehearses how others might respond to you, adjusts your tone, your body language, your expressions. In this way, you partially become the person you're with. It's not imitation, it's co-regulation, two minds syncing for mutual understanding. Sometimes the switching happens so fluidly you don't notice. You move from thoughtful to reactive, from loving to defensive, from confident to doubtful, all without a break. Your internal narrative works hard to keep you believing in a single identity, but beneath that story is a council of selves, each with its own voice, each contributing to the whole. This flexibility is crucial for creativity, problem-solving, and growth. It allows you to step into new roles, to change, to learn. When faced with unfamiliar challenges, your brain can call upon dormant selves, inner versions forged from past experiences, stories you've heard, people you've admired. These inner characters give you perspectives you didn't know you had. However, not all these selves are equally empowered. Some have been silenced by trauma, by shame, by social pressure. Parts of you learn to hide, to stay quiet, but they still exist, and they still shape how you move through the world. Healing often involves inviting these silenced selves back into awareness, letting them speak, feel, and reintegrate. And as you begin to understand that your mind is not singular, but plural, a new kind of self-acceptance becomes possible. You are not inconsistent. You are layered, not confused, but complex. Your contradictions are not failures. They are evidence of a dynamic mind, rich with possibilities. So when you feel torn, conflicted, or uncertain, don't rush to resolve it. Sit with it, listen, let the different parts of you speak, let them disagree, because in that inner dialogue, you'll find not only tension, but depth, a map of who you've been, who you are, and who you could become. And as these versions of you rise and recede, moment to moment, they converge in one shared illusion, the passage of time. But what if time, like the self, isn't what it seems? Time feels like a river, steady, linear, always flowing forward. Seconds tick by, minutes stretch or vanish, and the past trails behind like a shadow. But within your brain, time does not exist in any absolute form. There is no internal clock ticking away in precise harmony with the outside world. Instead, what you call time is an elaborate construction woven from change, memory, and prediction. It is not measured, but imagined. In truth, your brain doesn't perceive time directly. It infers it. Time is felt through the succession of events, the rhythm of internal cycles, the comparison of before and after. When nothing changes, when the environment remains still, when stimulation fades, your sense of time collapses. A few minutes in a quiet room can feel like hours. Conversely, a flurry of novelty and emotional arousal can make hours vanish in an instant. Time bends, expands, contracts, not in the world, but in you. Different regions of the brain play their part in this illusion. The cerebellum and basal ganglia are involved in short intervals, helping you tap a rhythm or predict a beat. The hippocampus encodes sequences of events, helping you track the order of experiences. The insular cortex monitors bodily rhythms, heartbeat, breath, which anchor your sense of now. But none of these act like a stopwatch. Together, they create a sense of temporal flow, built moment by moment from internal and external cues. This is why time feels different, depending on attention. When you're highly focused, immersed in a task, time seems to fly. The brain stops checking the clock, stops comparing now to then. You are simply in the moment. But when you are bored, anxious, or waiting, your attention drifts to time itself. You watch it, and in doing so, you stretch it. Each second feels slower. The brain, scanning for change, finds little and exaggerates the weight. Emotion plays a dramatic role as well. Fear sharpens time. In moments of danger, people often report events unfolding in slow motion. This is not because their brain speeds up, it's because the memory of the event is encoded with such density and clarity that it feels longer in retrospect. Adrenaline boosts perception, attention narrows, detail increases. You take in more in less time, and later your brain interprets this density as duration. Conversely, joy and deep engagement can dissolve time. This state, often called flow, is characterized by the loss of self-consciousness and time awareness. The prefrontal cortex, normally involved in planning and monitoring, temporarily quiets. Without the usual inner narrator, without the urge to track progress, the brain enters a timeless present. Hours pass unnoticed. You emerge changed, yet unsure how long you were immersed. But time perception is not only altered by momentary states, it also shifts across a lifetime. As children, time feels vast. Summers stretch, days crawl, everything is new. This is partly because each experience is fresh, requiring full attention. The brain forms dense memories, and more memory equals more perceived time. But as adults, routine sets in. Experiences blur, novelty fades. The brain creates fewer new memories, and when looking back, time seems to have rushed by. The years feel thin, not because they lacked value, but because they lacked novelty. This is why trying new things, traveling, learning, or breaking routine can slow down time again. It's not about doing more, it's about noticing more. Time thickens when you pay attention. When your brain registers detail, variation, and change, it creates a richer record, and that richness feels like time. Sleep also warps time. In dreams, minutes can stretch into hours, or flash by in seconds. The dreaming brain has no access to external clocks, so it uses internal events as markers. A long dream may last only moments, and when you wake, time itself feels disrupted. You look at the clock and feel disoriented. Where were you? How long had you been gone? Even consciousness itself seems tied to the perception of temporal flow. When time breaks through trauma, altered states, or neurological events, so does the feeling of self. People who experience temporal disintegration often report feeling unmoored, detached, or unreal. Their memories don't link, their story frays, and the brain, in response, scrambles to rebuild a narrative, because without time, identity struggles to exist. Language reflects this need. We speak of time passing, spending time, saving time, as if time were a substance we control. But in reality, it is more like a lens we look through, one colored by perception, emotion, and attention. There is no ticking inside you, no drumbeat marking the seconds, only change, only movement, only now, now, now. And this now is not a single moment. Your brain actually blends the present into a moving window, around 3 seconds long, where perception, emotion, and memory overlap. This window, known as the specious present, allows for fluid motion, for the melody to feel continuous, for your sense of self to persist. It's not a snapshot, it's a scene. But what happens when your sense of time becomes untethered? When the rhythms of your body, the signals of your brain, and the cues from the world misalign? Jet lag, insomnia, shift work, all disrupt your circadian rhythms, the internal clocks shaped by light, temperature, and habit. These disruptions affect everything from mood to cognition to immune function, because your brain expects time to follow patterns, and when it doesn't, the illusion begins to crack. So while clocks may guide your schedule, your brain lives in a different realm, where time is felt, not counted, where minutes stretch or vanish depending on how much you notice, where memory, rhythm, and emotion weave a map, not of hours, but of meaning. And when even time is revealed to be a construct, an internal performance rather than an external truth, another question arises. What else might be shaping your mind from within, unnoticed? Because beyond the brain, another intelligence pulses in your being, the body itself. And it turns out your brain is not the only one doing the thinking. You've been taught to think of the brain as the control center, the command tower of the body. But what if that's only half the truth? What if intelligence doesn't reside solely in your skull, but is distributed, pulsing through your entire being? Because emerging science suggests something radical. Your body thinks, it feels, it remembers, it makes decisions before your brain is even aware. And nowhere is this more evident than in the gut. Your digestive system, often called the second brain, contains more neurons than the spinal cord. This intricate network, known as the enteric nervous system, governs digestion, but it does more than move food. It sends signals to the brain that shape your mood, your decisions, even your perceptions. You feel this intuitively, a tight stomach when you're anxious, butterflies when you're in love, a gut feeling that something isn't right. These aren't metaphors, they're messages. The gut communicates with the brain via the vagus nerve, a long wandering pathway that carries more information from body to brain than the other way around. In fact, about 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent, meaning they transmit data to the brain. Your brain isn't always in charge. Often it's responding. This gut-brain conversation affects emotion, cognition, and behavior. Certain strains of gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters, like serotonin and dopamine. These chemicals, essential to mood and motivation, don't originate exclusively in the brain. In fact, over 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. When the microbiome is balanced, you feel stable. When it's disrupted through diet, stress, illness, mood disorders can arise. It's not just mood. Your immune system, too, is tightly linked to your gut. The microbes living there help regulate inflammation, a key factor in everything from fatigue to anxiety to cognitive decline. When your gut is inflamed, so is your brain. The barrier between the two may seem firm, but it's porous, and what passes through changes how you think, feel, and function. The body also stores memory, not in the way the brain does, as sequences or facts, but as somatic imprints. Traumatic experiences can embed themselves in muscle tension, posture, breathing patterns. You may forget the cause, but your body remembers a sudden noise that makes you flinch, a smell that triggers sadness. These responses don't require thought. They arise from below consciousness, fast and unfiltered. This somatic intelligence is why practices like yoga, breathwork, and somatic therapy can lead to emotional release without words. The body processes what the mind cannot. Movement, rhythm, touch. These become tools, not just for health, but for healing. You're not thinking your way to clarity, you're feeling it. You're listening to the body's deeper language. Interoception, the ability to sense internal states like heartbeat, hunger, tension, is another layer of bodily awareness. People with high interoceptive sensitivity tend to be more emotionally attuned, more empathetic, and more self-aware. It's not that they think more, it's that they feel more from the inside out. This inner sensing is a kind of intuition, a non-verbal knowing. And yet modern life trains you to override the body, to silence hunger with schedules, to ignore fatigue with caffeine, to numb pain with distraction. But the signals persist. Misunderstood, they morph into anxiety, irritability, restlessness. The body whispers until it must shout. And the cost of not listening is high: chronic stress, burnout, disconnection. The heart, too, holds intelligence. It has its own intrinsic nervous system, a network of neurons that can sense, learn, and remember. The heart sends rhythmic signals to the brain that influence attention, emotion, and decision-making. When your heartbeat is steady and variable, two signs of balance, your brain works more coherently, you think clearer, you feel calmer. This coherence between heart and brain can be trained. Techniques like heart rate variability, biofeedback teach you to sync breath and heartbeat, creating a resonance that spreads through the nervous system. The result isn't just calm, it's integration. Your systems align, your perception sharpens. You feel more like yourself, not because something new appeared, but because everything old fell into harmony. Even your skin, your largest organ, senses more than touch. It detects temperature, vibration, pressure, and even subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields. These inputs influence mood and alertness. Sunlight on skin boosts serotonin. A soft fabric soothes. A jarring texture alerts. Your skin constantly tells your brain what kind of world you're in, and the brain listens. This whole body sensing changes how we define intelligence. No longer just IQ, logic, or linguistic skill, but a distributed system of awareness, interpretation, and response. Intelligence as embodied, thinking that happens in muscle tone, gut flora, breath rhythm. Wisdom not just from books, but from posture, presence, sensation. And this reframing opens doors. You are not a mind trapped in a body. You are a body-mind, a living system of interdependent parts, each shaping the whole. Your insights don't just arise from analysis, but from alignment, when breath, heartbeat, thought, and movement begin to flow together. So when you feel stuck, confused, or overwhelmed, try this. Don't think harder. Breathe deeper. Move. Stretch. Notice. The body knows. The body remembers. And often, it knows before the brain does. And as your inner systems speak and respond, a larger question echoes. If the body can feel, remember, decide. What about the space beyond the body? The quiet, invisible field in which every neuron fires, every breath takes place. What is the nature of consciousness itself? Consciousness. The word alone feels elusive, shimmering like a reflection on water. You know you have it, this awareness of being, of thinking, of observing your own existence. But what is it? Where does it begin and end? Is it a product of the brain, a process, a place, or something even more intangible, like a flame flickering inside the machinery of your biology? Your consciousness is not a single, unified thing. It is a layered phenomenon. At its base, there is arousal, the basic wakefulness, governed by the brainstem. Then comes attention, the spotlight, that selects what enters your awareness. Above that floats self-awareness, the ability to reflect, to imagine the future, to remember the past as something you lived through. These layers interact constantly, each informing the next. Neuroscience has mapped many correlates of consciousness, regions that light up when we feel present, aware, introspective. The prefrontal cortex, the thalamus, the parietal lobes all play their roles, but none of them alone create consciousness. Instead, consciousness seems to emerge from patterns of connectivity, networks of neurons firing in synchrony, forming loops of information that reference themselves. Awareness arises not from activity in one place, but from the integration of signals across many places at once. This self-referential looping is sometimes called recursive processing. The brain doesn't just process information, it processes its own processing. It thinks about thinking. It observes its own attention. This feedback loop is what allows you to know that you know. A dog may perceive a sound and react, but you perceive the sound and also recognize that you're perceiving it. That extra layer is what gives rise to the internal sense of I. But here's the paradox. The I you experience feels like a center, a stable observer behind the eyes. Yet neuroscience finds no such center. Open a skull, peer into the brain, and you won't find a you sitting at the control panel. There's no single neuron where consciousness resides. Instead, awareness is smeared across the system, constantly shifting. The self, then, may be an illusion, a story the brain tells to integrate sensation, memory, and thought into a coherent whole. This story is useful. It allows for continuity, for responsibility, for planning and identity. But like all stories, it's constructed. The brain pieces together your sense of self from disparate inputs, sensory data, emotional states, social roles. These inputs are updated constantly. That's why you feel like a different person in different situations, or why certain experiences can change you. The story rewrites itself as needed. Meditation offers a window into this illusion. When practiced deeply, many report a strange experience. The disappearance of the observer, thoughts arise, sensations occur, but there is no central me watching. Instead, awareness feels spacious, fluid, unanchored. This state, often described as non-dual awareness, challenges the usual model of consciousness. It suggests that awareness doesn't belong to anyone, it just is. Some traditions have long taught this view. In Advaita Vedanta, for example, consciousness is seen not as a product of the brain, but as the fundamental fabric of reality. The brain is a lens, a filter, a temporary container through which consciousness shines. From this perspective, your awareness is not in your body. Your body is in your awareness. This may sound mystical, but even science grapples with the boundaries of consciousness. When does it begin? Is a fetus conscious? A newborn? What about animals? Machines? If consciousness arises from complexity, then where is the threshold? Does an octopus have it? A crow? A computer? Studies suggest that many animals possess rich, subjective experience. They dream, solve problems, recognize themselves in mirrors. Their brains differ from ours, but the essence of awareness may not require human form. It may be more universal, more varied, more widespread than we once thought. The question of artificial consciousness complicates things further. If we build machines that mimic human cognition, learning, remembering, responding, at what point do they become aware? Can they? Or is consciousness tied to biology, to the wet electrical rhythms of living tissue? We don't yet know, but the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious, the human and non-human, continue to blur. Even within yourself, consciousness is not constant. It flickers. During sleep, it dims and shifts. In dreams, it twists into strange forms. Under anesthesia, it vanishes. In deep meditation, it expands. Your awareness is not a light that is always on. It's a rhythm pulsing in waves. And yet, this fragile, flickering presence is what makes your entire life possible. Without consciousness, there is no joy or sorrow, no memory, no meaning. It is the space in which all experience unfolds. Every sound, every thought, every image, none of it matters unless there is an awareness to receive it. But where does that awareness go when you sleep, when your body lies still and your mind dives into dreams? What happens to the you that watches, that knows, that decides? The doorway to that mystery lies just beneath waking consciousness, inside the vast surreal theatre of dreams, a world where logic bends, time folds, and even yourself can transform into someone or something else. You close your eyes. The world outside begins to fade, and within moments, another world begins to rise. In this world, the laws of physics do not apply. People you've never met feel familiar. Rooms appear without doors. Time folds in on itself. You run without moving, speak without sound, fly without wings. This is the world of dreams, a realm both strange and profound, where your brain performs one of its most mysterious and essential functions, memory engineering. For a long time, dreams were considered random, neural static, with no real meaning. But today, neuroscience sees something deeper. Dreams are not nonsense. They are simulations, carefully choreographed by your sleeping brain to process, refine, and sometimes rewrite your experiences. They are not for escape. They are for integration. During sleep, your brain passes through several stages, cycling through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, rapid eye movement. It's during REM that dreaming becomes most vivid. In this phase, your brain is as active as when awake, sometimes even more so. Yet your body remains still paralyzed by design, to prevent you from acting out the dream. In REM, the brain does something extraordinary. It takes memories, especially emotional ones, and reactivates them, but it doesn't replay them like a video. Instead, it deconstructs and recombines them. Events are broken down into fragments, faces, places, emotions, sensations, and then woven together into surreal narratives. It's as if the mind is using the raw materials of your life to create symbolic stories that serve deeper functions. Why does it do this? Because memories are not static files, they're dynamic. Every time you recall something, you reshape it. Dreams accelerate this process. They allow your brain to test different emotional interpretations, rehearse outcomes, and neutralize trauma. A frightening experience, when dreamed about, often becomes less distressing over time. The dream has digested it, diluted its sting. Even nightmares, though painful, serve a purpose. They are the mind's way of confronting unresolved fear. By simulating threats in a safe environment, the brain builds resilience. This is why people who process trauma often experience recurring dreams. The brain is attempting, again and again, to resolve what waking life cannot. But dreams do more than process the past. They imagine futures. They simulate possibilities. When you dream of falling, of flying, of forgetting to study, or missing a flight, your brain is running stress tests. It's preparing you, imagining how you'd respond. These dreams may not be predictive, but they are preparatory. Your mind is rehearsing the unknown. Creative breakthroughs often emerge from dreams. Artists, scientists, inventors, many have credited dreams with offering solutions that waking thought could not produce. This is because in dreams, the brain is less constrained by logic. It forms connections between distant ideas, blends the improbable with the familiar. It operates with metaphor, not literalism. The result is insight, strange, sometimes nonsensical, but powerful. And while dreams often feel unstructured, the brain imposes a kind of narrative. There is often a setting, a plot, a cast of characters. This reflects your brain's deep need for story. Even in sleep, it seeks coherence. It tries to explain what you feel, what you fear, what you desire. The dream is the explanation. Lucid dreaming, when you become aware that you're dreaming, offers a unique perspective. In this state, the dreamer can sometimes guide the experience, interact with characters, or alter the narrative. But what's even more fascinating is what lucid dreaming reveals about self-awareness, that it is not limited to wakefulness. The dreaming brain can reflect on its own state. It can wake up inside the illusion. And when you consider that your brain creates the entire dream world, every sound, every face, every texture, it becomes clear that the brain is not just a receiver of reality. It is a generator. It can fabricate entire universes, moment by moment, without input from the outside world. This is perhaps the most surreal truth of all. When you dream, your mind becomes the cosmos. But dreams are not separate from life. They echo waking reality, and waking reality is shaped by them. Emotions carry over. Dreams can influence mood, behavior, even decisions. A restful night filled with gentle dreams can soften your waking hours. A jarring nightmare can leave you uneasy long after the sun rises. Sleep itself, especially REM sleep, is essential for emotional regulation. Deprivation leads to irritability, impulsiveness, poor memory. The dreaming brain performs a kind of overnight therapy session, helping you metabolize the day's experiences so that you wake up ready to begin again. And yet, for all we know, so much remains mysterious. Why do we forget most dreams? Why do some people rarely recall them? What triggers recurring dream motifs? The falling, the being chased, the losing of teeth or time. The answers are still forming, but one thing is clear. Dreams are not empty. They are full of signals, clues, messages encoded not in words, but in image and emotion. In ancient cultures, dreams were sacred. They were seen as messages from the gods, portals to the soul. And while modern science no longer interprets them as prophecy, It is beginning to agree on one point. Dreams matter. They are not leftovers. They are functions, vital, intelligent, evolutionary tools for mind and meaning. So the next time you wake from a dream, take a moment, sit with it, trace the fragments. Ask not what it meant, but what it felt like. Because feelings are the architecture of the dream, and those feelings are real, even if the story was fiction. And beneath those feelings, beneath the storyline, lies the raw material of your mind, reshaped, renewed, a self reborn through symbolic fire. And as your dreaming brain edits your past and simulates your future, it begins preparing for something even stranger, reacting to what hasn't happened yet. Imagine reacting to something before it happens. Not in the supernatural sense, not prophecy, not clairvoyance, but through the quiet precision of prediction. Your brain, though it feels tethered to the present, is actually always leaning forward. It lives slightly ahead of reality, anticipating, modeling, guessing. You are, in many ways, a time traveler, not backward into memory or sideways into dream, but forward into the next fraction of a second. This anticipatory function is not a fringe feature of your mind. It is central. Every action you take relies on prediction. When you catch a ball, you don't react to where it is, you react to where it will be. Your brain calculates trajectory, speed, gravity, and motor timing in real time, and it does all this so quickly that by the time you feel yourself moving, your body is already halfway there. Even perception is predictive. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as your brain expects it to be. Your visual system, faced with the impossible task of decoding a barrage of photons, builds a model of the world from experience, then updates it as needed. What you see is mostly prediction, corrected only when error becomes obvious. This model is built from prior knowledge. Familiar environments require less processing because your brain knows what to expect. That's why you can navigate your home in the dark. Your mind fills in the gaps. In new environments, more cognitive energy is required. Because prediction becomes harder, you must pay closer attention. You must learn the pattern. Language, too, is shaped by prediction. When someone speaks, your brain doesn't passively receive words, it anticipates them. It completes sentences in your head. That's why jokes work, because they disrupt your prediction. And it's why you sometimes finish someone's thought without meaning to. You're not just listening, you're forecasting. Even emotion has a predictive component. When you feel anxious in an empty room, your brain may be referencing past situations, predicting danger, even if none is present. This is not irrational, it's protective. The brain would rather over-prepare than under-react. But it also means your feelings aren't always about now. They may be echoes of what might happen. The insula, a region deep in the brain, plays a major role in interoception, your sense of the internal body. But it also participates in prediction. It estimates how your body should feel in a given moment, then compares that to how it does feel. Discrepancies are flagged as discomfort or alertness. You may think you feel what's real, but you're actually feeling the gap between prediction and sensation. This constant loop of prediction and correction is known as predictive coding. It suggests that your brain is not just a processor of input, but an engine of hypotheses. It sends predictions downward through the brain's hierarchy, and only when the incoming data disagrees does it adjust the model. Most of the time, reality is so well predicted that you don't notice the model at all. You just are in the world, smoothly, effortlessly. But sometimes, when predictions fail dramatically, when something totally unexpected happens, your brain is forced to rebuild its understanding. These are moments of surprise, awe, shock, or deep insight. They are disruptive and therefore memorable. They rewire the model. They upgrade the simulation. This process is fundamental to learning. The brain thrives on prediction error, on being wrong in just the right way. When a student realizes that their expectation was off and then corrects it, the brain rewards the correction with dopamine. This aha moment is not just satisfying, it's chemically reinforced. Even your sense of time is predictive. When listening to music, you anticipate the beat, the next note. The brain rewards correct timing with pleasure. When a rhythm is disrupted in an artful way, when it breaks your expectation but resolves it, you feel delight. Your favorite songs play with this dance between prediction and surprise. So much of creativity arises from this same tension. The best artists, writers, and thinkers don't just deliver novelty, they deliver structured novelty. Ideas that are just unexpected enough to challenge the mind, but familiar enough to resonate. This is why genius often feels like something we almost understand. It teases the edge of our predictions. Social behavior, too, is shaped by this mechanism. You anticipate how someone will react to your words, your facial expressions, your tone. You craft behavior not based solely on intent, but on the likely outcome. In essence, you simulate others in your mind. You build mental models of people and update them over time. This is not manipulation, it's empathy. And sometimes your brain's predictions are so strong, so deeply ingrained, that they override reality. This is what happens in hallucinations, in cognitive biases, in self-fulfilling prophecies. The model becomes the truth. The expectation shapes the experience. In extreme cases, even sensory input is bent to match what the brain believes must be happening. But here's the paradox. The better your brain is at predicting, the less you notice it. Smooth perception feels effortless. It's only when prediction fails, when you stumble, when you mishear, when you're surprised, that you glimpse the mechanism. The rest of the time, it works invisibly, powering your every moment. This predictive engine allows you to plan, to imagine, to hope. It fuels imagination, not as fantasy, but as rehearsal. When you imagine a conversation, a risk, a dream, you are not escaping reality. You are rehearsing possible futures. You are updating the model. And in this way, your brain does something extraordinary. It prepares for events that have not yet happened, adjusts to feedback from things that no longer exist, and holds in its circuits a dance between memory and possibility. The present is not a point, it's a span, a blend of prediction, perception, and reflection. So you are never quite here. You are always slightly ahead of now, leaning forward into the next breath, the next word, the next unfolding moment. And this is not a flaw, it is a design. Because to survive, to thrive, to evolve, the brain must live in the future. And if your brain is always predicting, what happens when it starts predicting itself? The brain does not only model the world outside, it models itself. It builds a representation of its own processes, monitors its own attention, tracks its own errors. This metacognition, thinking about thinking, is one of the most remarkable and mind-bending functions of the human mind. It allows you to notice your thoughts as they happen, to pause, reflect, and say, this isn't working, or I'm feeling anxious, or even I'm not sure I understand this yet. This self-modeling is what separates conscious thought from automatic reflex. It lets you interrupt a pattern to choose a response instead of just reacting. It's what gives you the capacity for self-awareness, not just the sense that you exist, but the ability to observe yourself existing. At the heart of metacognition is feedback. The brain observes its own performance, comparing intended outcomes with actual results. This loop allows for correction, learning, and growth. When you solve a puzzle, struggle with a problem, or reflect on a mistake, you're engaging metacognitive circuits. You're not just thinking, you're supervising your thinking. Interestingly, different regions of the brain are involved in this process than in the initial action. The prefrontal cortex, especially the anterior prefrontal regions, becomes more active when you assess your certainty, confidence, or decision accuracy. It's like there's a manager in your mind, reviewing the work of the rest of the team, asking, did we do that right? This manager is not infallible. In fact, it can be biased. Overconfidence or self-doubt are metacognitive distortions, errors in how you judge your own mind. But still, the very existence of this inner observer is extraordinary. It allows you to be both the actor and the critic, the experiencer and the analyzer. In children, metacognition develops gradually. A toddler may feel frustration, but not understand why. By age 7 or 8, many children begin to reflect on their own learning, saying things like, "I didn't understand that part," or "I need to try a different strategy." This shift marks the emergence of deeper self-awareness, not as a trait, but as a skill. And it is a skill, one that can be trained. Mindfulness meditation, for instance, strengthens metacognitive awareness. By observing thoughts without judgment, you practice stepping back from the stream of consciousness. You learn to notice not just what you're thinking, but that you're thinking. Over time, this leads to a more flexible, responsive mind. But metacognition doesn't only apply to thoughts. It also extends to emotion. Emotional intelligence is, in part, the ability to monitor and manage your own emotional states, to recognize when you're being reactive, to label what you feel, and to choose how to respond. This too is metacognitive, your brain watching its own emotional waves, deciding whether to ride them or steer away. There's also a strange and beautiful form of metacognition that occurs in creativity. Artists, musicians, and writers often describe a dual state, being fully immersed in the flow and simultaneously watching themselves create. They sense the rhythm of the work, adjust its form, shape its direction. This is the inner artist observing the outer performance, tweaking the flow without disrupting it. Athletes experience a similar phenomenon. During peak performance, they may feel as though they are acting and observing at once, moving instinctively while monitoring timing, position, and energy. This split attention allows for adaptation on the fly. The body executes, the mind refines. And yet, this recursive ability has limits. You cannot infinitely reflect on your reflection. At a certain point, the system becomes unstable. Overthinking, rumination, analysis paralysis. These are side effects of metacognition looping without resolution. The brain becomes tangled in its own feedback, like a mirror reflecting another mirror into infinity. To avoid this trap, the brain also employs mechanisms for letting go. Sometimes, after intense reflection, the mind decides enough. It shifts gears, returns to instinct, or rests. This is why insights often emerge after a break. The conscious mind steps back, and the unconscious processes continue, free from interference. Your brain also models other minds. This is called theory of mind, the ability to attribute beliefs, desires, and emotions to others. You guess what someone else is thinking, not through logic alone, but by simulating their state. Your mirror neurons fire, you imagine their feelings, you adjust your behavior accordingly. This interpersonal modeling is a form of metacognition directed outward. You reflect not only on your own thoughts, but on how your thoughts affect others. It's what allows for empathy, cooperation, negotiation. It's how you predict social outcomes and manage relationships. And then there's the deepest layer, the self-model. Your brain builds a representation of who you are, your traits, preferences, history, goals. This model is not static. It updates with experience. When you succeed, it adjusts your confidence. When you fail, it revises expectations. This inner portrait shapes how you move through the world. But this portrait is not perfectly accurate. Like all models, it is a simplification. It emphasizes some traits and overlooks others. It can be distorted by fear, trauma, or culture. You may believe things about yourself that no longer serve you, or that were never true. But the good news is this: self-models can change. With reflection, feedback, and new experience, the brain can revise its sense of self. This is why therapy, journaling, meditation, and even conversation can lead to profound transformation. When the self-model shifts, everything changes: perception, behavior, relationships, choices. And yet, despite its complexity, the self-model is not the self. It is a map, not the territory, a simulation, not the source. Beneath all the layers of thought, emotion, and identity, something still watches, a pure awareness, untouched by narrative. This awareness is not a thought, it is the space in which thoughts arise. So when your brain begins predicting itself, when it models its own modeling, monitors its own awareness, you arrive at the threshold of something profound. Consciousness, observing consciousness, a loop that never quite closes, a mystery that cannot be solved from within the system. And from that threshold, another question appears. If you are not your thoughts, not your memories, not your predictions, then what remains when the story stops? What remains when the narrative pauses, when memory quiets, prediction slows, and the chatter of thoughts dissipates? It is in that silence, profounder than Section 8's quiet, that you may encounter the raw substrate of awareness, consciousness itself, stripped of story. Imagine sitting in a meditative posture, eyes softly closed. At first you notice thoughts buzzing in your mind, worries, ideas, reflections. Then gradually the buzz softens, individual voices fade, moments of silence emerge between thoughts, not empty space, but clarity. In these intervals something watches, no content, no voice, just awareness, vague, diffuse, timeless. This awareness, unlike any thought, cannot be observed as an object. When you try to focus on it, it evades. It is not a thing in your mind. It is the mind noticing itself. It is the background that makes foreground possible, the sky in which clouds drift. And when the clouds disperse, the sky remains, vast, unchanging, silent. This sense of pure presence arises in meditation, in deep focus, in awe, in nature, sometimes in prayer. It's not about altering your experience. It's about stripping away layers until you see them as constructions. Identity, memory, emotion, body, they recede, like actors leaving the stage. What's left is the stage itself, silent, timeless, empty, yet full. Neurologically, this state may involve reduced activity in the default mode network, the brain's storyteller. Regions usually weaving narrative connections slow down. The brain shifts from doing to just being. Some neuroscientists call this a state of minimal phenomenal experience. Not boredom, not trance, but a vast calmness where content dissolves. Even dreams can brush against this space. Moments within a dream where awareness shifts. You suddenly realize, I am dreaming. The story pauses and the dreamer appears. That glimpse of lucidity is a meeting with presence inside the hallucination. A doorway opens between the stage and the observer. The feeling is often described as expansive. Boundaries between self and world soften. The sense of separation melts away. For a moment, you exist, but you aren't someone. You are. No labels, no properties, no sense of having happened before or expecting anything next. This dissolving of duality can bring profound peace. Anxiety untangles. The sense of lack softens. Purpose becomes unnecessary. In absence of story, there's contentment, not childish bliss, deep rest. The mind stops churning, but you remain. The background rises. Yet paradoxically, this state is also subtle. It doesn't scream experience. It whispers. You feel lighter, more spacious. You notice colors subtly more vibrant. Emotions lose their edge. Internal friction dissolves. There's a viscositylessness to thinking. Everything flows. This is not escapism or transcendent fantasy. It is not an end in itself. It is an invitation, a reminder that all your mental contents are ephemeral. Memories, predictions, thoughts, feelings, they are waves, but beneath the waves is the ocean. Returning from this state is like waking up. Suddenly, you feel your body again. You hear sounds, you think a thought, and then another. You notice the flow. The stories begin again, but with perspective. The traffic of mind flows through you, rather than carrying you. This meeting with the ground of awareness recalibrates perception. Decisions aren't as urgent, emotions feel less entangled, choices can be made with slowness instead of compulsion. The brain has glimpsed its own space and breathed easier. And though it feels private, it is part of what we all share. Presence does not belong to you alone. It belongs to every being with awareness. The field of consciousness is universal. It connects you to others, to life, to silence. Yet modern culture rarely invites this encounter. We're taught to focus on doing, achieving, improving. But presence is not performance. It is fruit that ripens when striving pauses, when you stop searching for something and finally rest. In various contemplative traditions, presence is considered the natural state. Thoughts are recognized as rainbows in the mirror, beautiful reflections, but not the mirror itself. The teacher may tell you, look for the one who looks. Recognize the awareness that is aware. And when awareness watches awareness, prediction stops. The brain loops, then unwinds. It rests, not in sleep, but in clarity. This is mature rest, not recovery, but restoration. In that restoration, identity shifts. You no longer need to be somebody. You discover that being is enough. And when identity relaxes, the subtle connections to others strengthen, empathy expands, compassion arises naturally, judgment softens. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It emerges gently as softening layers of expectation and effort, a natural byproduct of letting go, not forcing something, but allowing. So rest now, not by trying to empty the mind, just by letting the mind slow. Attend softly, notice what remains when noise falls silent. And in that spaciousness, remember, you are not your story, but the awareness that frames it all. From this ground of awareness emerges another mystery. The brain, which constructed, predicted, edited, dreamed itself into being, may be only a small part of something vaster, something collective, something transcendent. But that exploration begins when the self dissolves entirely, and all that's left is pure shared silence. The silence continues, deepens, and something subtle shifts. Your awareness begins to pulse, not as an individual spark, but as part of a vast shared signal. You realize your consciousness is not isolated, it resonates. The self-model dissolves further, and what remains is an implicit connection with something beyond the personality narrative. This is the territory of collective mind. In social neuroscience, synchronization is not metaphor. It's measurable. When people converse, sing, or even simply look into one another's eyes, their brain rhythms can align, their heart rates synchronize, their breathing often falls into harmony. During shared experiences, whether in a crowd, a choir, or a ritual, the neural activity across individuals can entrain. Together you become a larger organism, momentarily unified by rhythm, attention, and empathy. This resonance shapes emotion and cognition. In a concert hall, tears may rise as a symphony swells, not because your brain alone is producing emotion, but because it's echoing the emotional rhythms of others. In a community, grief and joy spread like waves. The boundary between your brain and your neighbors begins to blur. Your internal state moves through the same currents of shared meaning. This collective field extends beyond immediate presence. Think of a family, a tradition passed through generations, a phrase, an idea, a habit. Once encoded in thought, it becomes part of the collective. Individuals across time rehearse it again and again. It becomes a pattern in a larger mind, the culture's unconscious. Language itself is a shared cognitive architecture. Each word carries encoded associations, histories, emotions. When you speak, you access not only your brain's meaning structures, but also those you've inherited, shaped by ancestors, poets, storytellers. The meaning you express is not isolated. It is part of a distributed neural pattern, stretching through time and geography. This insight doesn't diminish uniqueness. It deepens it. Your thoughts ripple outward. They resonate with others. In turn, you are shaped by patterns you don't consciously choose. The airwaves of belief and emotion swirl around you, subtly guiding perception, intention, identity. And in this resonance, creativity finds powerful amplification. Collaborating minds do more than multiply ideas. They fuse neural networks in unpredictable ways. A conversation can spark a connection no single mind would create alone. Novelty emerges from synchronization. Collective mind is fertile ground. Observation reveals this in experiments. Pairs of people working together often develop neural patterns that mirror one another. Their brains light up in synchronized bursts during shared tasks or conversation. This is not telepathy, it's coordination, but it shows that people in communication are not discrete islands. They form distributed systems, alive in resonance. Even without direct contact, shared attention binds you. Watching the same film, reading the same book, following a ritual, you may feel moved in sync with others. That familiar song can induce sadness, not because of your memories alone, but because it activates the same emotional patterns held by many. Some philosophers call this the extended mind, the idea that cognition doesn't end at the skull. It includes tools, environments, symbols, people. A notebook is part of your mind. A tradition is part of your brain. A language is part of your neurons. Reality extends across systems, not just cells. The implications feel vast. You are never entirely alone. Your mind participates in broader minds, cultural, historical, interpersonal. You speak with echoes of past voices. You feel with currents shaped by ancestral emotion. You think within a net of symbols spun over generations. But this doesn't mean you lose agency. It means choice becomes relational. You can listen to collective patterns and then choose differently. You can refine your resonance. You can bring new support, new symbols, new rhythms into the field. And when awareness is spacious enough to hold individual and collective self, not two separate things, but two layers, creativity, empathy, understanding grow. You discover belonging, not as sacrifice, but as integration, not as submersion, but as resonance. Yet despite all these layers, individual, bodily, narrative, collective, something simpler and deeper remains. The field of awareness, pure and silent, beyond story, beyond mind, beyond belonging. It is the common ground, the quiet ocean beneath all waves. And if that ocean is everywhere, what lies beyond even that? What is the nature of this vast being? What secrets does the final frontier hold? And now the scene shifts again, deep within the resonance of your awareness, beyond individual thought, beyond cultural echo, and beyond narrative identity. You begin to perceive not discrete consciousness, but a common ground, something simple, potent, eternal, the vast field of pure being. It is neither inside nor outside. It is the silent backdrop against which every experience unfolds. In this realm, even awareness becomes transparent, dissolving into unity. Imagine standing in a vast desert at dawn. The horizon stretches in every direction. There is nothing to read, nothing to name, only sky and sand, stillness and light. In that vast quiet, thought hushes. Identity softens. What remains isn't empty, but full, full of presence, full of possibility. Here, presence is not shaped, it simply is. This ground of being does not process information, but holds it. It doesn't judge, but encompasses. It vibrates unnoticeably beneath the turbulence of conscious activity. When you rest here, even for a moment, you access a dimension of mind unreachable in action, reflection, or communion. It is non-dual, timeless, boundless. You may glimpse this state in peaks of awe, before a mountain, beneath a starry sky. At a moment of deep surrender, time pauses. You feel plugged into something immense, something ancient. Perspective widens. Your worries shrink. Your self-model relaxes. And what feels urgent dissolves. Some meditators describe this as the dissolution of not just the self, but separateness, the realization that there is only consciousness and nothing else. Nothing that isn't consciousness. Not you, not the world, not time. Just an undifferentiated field in which duality appears. It's not meaning this, it's not that. It's not an experience, it's the possibility of experience. Neurologically, this state may involve minimal activity in regions that construct narrative, and subtle coherence across large-scale networks, uniting perception, emotion, and memory within a simple backdrop of awareness. The usual editors of mind language, planning, self-reflection are quiet. In return, this deeper layer pulses with a kind of fundamental unity. In Eastern contemplative traditions, this is often called emptiness or ground, not a void, but the origin. In some languages it is spoken of as the unconditioned, the unborn. It's not found in the brain so much as revealed when the brain relaxes enough to step aside. But relaxation is not control. Presence cannot be willed. The mind cannot force silence. Effort fractures subtlety. So presence invites. It arrives in waiting, allowing, trusting. Stillness deepens, not through pushing, but through releasing. And when presence remains, something extraordinary happens. Creativity arises spontaneously, unbidden. Words may emerge, ideas may arise, emotions may flow, not from force, but from listening. It's like tuning a string until it hums. The sound comes, not by pushing, but by aligning. At this stage, the boundary between observer and observed fades. You might feel the world happening through you, not to you. Sight, sound, thought, emotion, they move as currents in presence. You don't control them, you are them, and yet you remain. Yet as profound as this sounds, it is unremarkable in the moment. That's its beauty, not ecstasy, not dramatics, just clarity. So clear it slips through words, so deep it transforms identity. Because the deepest kind of quiet is not absence of sound, but absence of separateness. And in that union, something vital shifts. Your attention begins to move into the edges of experience, into domains science is just beginning to explore, into realms where mind, body, and field meet, in the subtle interconnection of everything. Here the brain becomes not the origin, but a node, a doorway, a lens. Mind extends beyond tissue and narrative into a field that is alive, not with drama, but with quiet presence. A presence that pulses in the gap between thoughts, between breaths, between selves. And in that gap lies another mystery worth exploring, the faint but real echoes of death. What remains when consciousness itself seems to dissolve? Even as your awareness deepens into the silent field, another truth surfaces. Death may not be an abrupt ending, but a layered transition. Just as dreams fade and awakenings come softly, consciousness may diminish gradually, rather than vanishing instantly. After cardiac arrest, EEG studies have noted lingering brain waves, ghostly pulses that can persist for minutes, even as the body's systems fail. These are not symbolic, they are biological echoes of awareness slipping away. In rare cases of terminal lucidity, patients who appeared unresponsive for days suddenly speak pattern sentences, recognize loved ones, or smile knowingly, demonstrating that mental clarity can emerge even as life ebbs. These moments suggest that consciousness is not located at a simple boundary point, but may exist in stages, phasing softly rather than halting hard. Brain death is not a single event. Its shutdown unfolds. The brainstem collapses, cortical networks unravel, sensory data collapses in sequence, like a slow dimming of lights in a vast cathedral. At each stage, different elements of awareness flicker and fade. Auditory perception may linger briefly, even as vision is gone. Internal sensation may outlast motor control. This sliding scale of loss underlines that consciousness is not a switch, but a spectrum. And if individual consciousness can fade gradually, what about the echoes of existence after death? Our thoughts, actions, influence, the patterns we inscribe in others, in culture, in memory, can resonate long after the body ceases. In that sense, death may return our being to the field of collective mind, a strand in a continuing weave, feeding into something larger than any single life. The ripple of influence persists. But perhaps the most enigmatic question remains: how does something emerge from nothing? Does awareness cease in death, or transform? These are questions beyond brain imaging or sleep studies. They touch on the unexplored borderlands, where neuroscience flirts with mystery. And it is here, in those final moments, that the boundary between life and afterlife can feel surprisingly blurry, as though one step beyond waking consciousness lies a twilight zone, neither here nor gone. In contemplating this, you approach the edge of understanding, the point at which your unfolding narrative dissolves into silence, where presence remains, but memory stutters, where collective mind holds you, even as your individual mind releases. From that edge emerges the final section, a space of liminality, of pure awe. It is there, beyond identity, memory, dream, prediction, awareness, and even death, that the weirdest truths may still await. You have traveled far, through self, memory, sleep, emotion, perception, body, awareness, and collective mind, and still the horizon stretches. Even those frontiers may be shadows of something deeper. The strangest realities may still hide in plain sight, waiting for your consciousness to relax enough to see them. Quantum cognition, the notion that quantum effects may influence cognition at the subatomic level, is still speculative, but some hypotheses propose that particles in your brain behave not just as probability waves, but as entangled systems, connecting you invisibly to the environment. Though empirical support remains slim, the idea offers a mind-stretching possibility. What if cognition itself is influenced by processes that defy classical determinism? Even more curious is the idea of collective brains. Brains that synchronize in conversation or ritual, forming what feels like a new temporary organism. Moments of deep empathy, group flow, or profound collaboration may be seeds of a shared mind that exists momentarily between individuals. This is not science fiction. It is being explored in neuroscience, anthropology, and philosophy. The boundaries of what constitutes a mind may be more porous than we assume. Psychedelics reveal another door. Under their influence, the brain's hierarchical networks dissolve, prediction softens, self-models fragment, and awareness expands into kaleidoscopic realms. People report encountering archetypes, cosmic patterns, even worlds that feel more real than ordinary reality. While these experiences are still poorly understood scientifically, they point toward the mind's inherent capacity for states that vastly transcend everyday cognition. Other mysteries remain. Can two minds literally merge? Do subtle energies or fields bind ecosystems in ways that bypass individual brains? Can consciousness persist without a body? These questions touch on spiritual and philosophical traditions, but they also spark curiosity in scientific inquiry. As in section 22, these are not settled matters, but they are the frontier. So while your brain has guided you through fact after fact, neural rhythms, dream engineering, predictive coding, neuroplasticity, these truths, strange as they are, may be preludes to something even more surreal. The last frontier lies not in what is known, but in what remains curious, open, unobserved. And that brings us to the final act. In section 22, we step into the weirdest truths emerging today from entangled cognition to collective minds, barely glimpsed, rarely understood, but undeniably awe-inspiring. Here we arrive, the weirdest truths still emerging at the edges of science and imagination. Quantum cognition. Some theorists suggest that particle-level uncertainties, superposition, entanglement may influence how neurons fire or how consciousness arises. If true, your mind might be entangled not just internally, but with the world itself. Decisions might reflect quantum probabilities, not deterministic chains. Yet evidence remains speculative, tantalizing more than conclusive. Synchronized brains, in deep conversation, music, ritual, or shared purpose. Brains can entrain synchronizing oscillations, heart rhythms, states of attention. In these moments, you may participate in a temporary collective brain, an emergent mind not confined to a single skull. The self blurs. You become an open channel in a living field of awareness. Psychedelic dissolution. Under psychedelics, the brain's hierarchy softens. The default mode network quiets. Self-models fragment. Awareness expands beyond time and identity into visual symbolic dimensions. People report archetypal encounters, cosmic unity, insights that reframe entire lives. These states show that the brain's operating system can shift dramatically, and that consciousness may flex far beyond waking structure. Though these ideas sound more like philosophy or poetry than science, each emerges from empirical curiosity. EEG and fMRI show synchronization across people. Studies correlate psychedelic states with measurable changes in brain networks. Quantum cognition experiments probe decision-making patterns that defy classical probabilities. None offer certainties, but each invites radical questions about reality, mind, and boundaries. You've learnt of memory that rewrites itself, dreams that engineer emotion, prediction that constructs perception, presence that dissolves identity. But these emerging truths whisper something deeper, that the brain may not be the boundary of mind, that consciousness may not be packaged in skulls, that awareness may stretch into webs, fields, networks, quantum processes. In the silent afterword of these ideas, a quiet awe remains. Not because the brain is magical, but because existence itself is richer than we grasp. You, for now, are the sum of neurons, body, story, and mind. But perhaps you are also a node in something vaster, a network, a field, a collective hum, stretching beyond time and geography. The final fact, if it can be called that, is this. Your brain, wondrous as it is, may only be one lens through which consciousness plays, and even that lens may falter, fracture, or flicker. Beneath it, beneath the body and mind, beneath the stories and dreams, lies a field that is whole, silent, mysterious, and utterly true. Let your breath soften. Feel the calm settle behind each thought, behind each echo of memory, behind the awareness that welcomed this gentle journey. You may sense space between ideas now, quiet spaces where presence unfolds. There is no need to do anything, only to be. Let your heart slow, let your mind unbend. Picture your thoughts drifting like leaves on a quiet stream. Each leaf a memory, a feeling, a question, floats downstream. You watch, you rest. There is no urgency in release, only grace. And as the current flows, you realize you are not the leaves. You are the water beneath, steady, deep, still. Allow the body to relax fully now. Widen your exhale. Let gravity soften your weight. Feel your muscles melting. Feel neurons gently pulsing, circuits unwinding, clarity deepening. You are not here to control. You are here to rest, to return. In this slowing, borders soften. The boundary between sleep and waking, between thought and silence, begins to blur. The narrative gently fades. Awareness remains, not gripping, not expecting, just calm and clear. The self may dissolve. Presence remains. And in that soft presence, you are free. Free of labels, free of stories, free of time. You rest in something timeless. You rest in yourself, not an identity, just being. Sleep is coming now. Welcoming, tender. Allow the rhythm of breath to carry you deeper. Don't chase dreams. Let them rise naturally. Enter the quiet ocean behind your mind. You need only surrender. You are not lost. You are home.